Well, good morning. Thank you for being with us this morning. Thank you for spending some time out of your busy schedule to talk about a topic that is important to all of us, obviously. This morning, there are a couple of folks that need to be thanked specifically, and that is the OCJP for their funding and participation and support of this program and other programming throughout the state. They do so much good work throughout the state of Tennessee. We're grateful for them and their support. We are grateful to Dave Worland, who's the Executive Director for the Governor's Office of Faith-Based and Community Initiatives. Dave continues to reach out and work to pull this community, the anti-trafficking community, together in the state of Tennessee, obviously under the leadership of Governor Bill Lee, the 50th governor for the state of Tennessee. And we are grateful for his office and his administration paying attention to the issue, providing strategy with it, and then sometimes most importantly, and the easiest piece to get left off, providing resources to get the good work and the good strategy done. So we're grateful for those folks for helping us today. This morning, we have gathered on the call youth pastors and pastors, school teachers and administrators, community leaders, coaches, businesses, and other anti-trafficking organizations that are engaged in this fight, that are here to help us learn about this topic that is so dear to all of our hearts. And that is, how do we do all that we can do to protect the children that are under our purview or within our reach? How do we protect our kids in the state of Tennessee from this horrific evil called sexual abuse, sexual exploitation, or child sex trafficking? It's an important question, and it's one that oftentimes we wrestle with, but we don't take time or have time to take to dig in a little bit deeper. What we want to do today is pull back the layer on that just a little bit and give some practical advice, some practical ways to be able to look at this issue, some practical ways to be able to think about this issue, and some very practical ways to be able to act on this issue. We often say that one of the first steps that anybody needs to take is just be willing to begin to have a series of awkward conversations with the children that are in our lives. And so I think we want to encourage all of us today to begin to do that. We don't have to be experts. We don't have to understand, or know all of the data and the research that's available to us. What we need to do is to be willing to appropriately, based on our position, our role, or our relationship, begin a series of what oftentimes feels like awkward conversations. Today, we want to help equip you for that. We're going to hear from three experts who have spent a lot of time or their entire lives working in this space. The first is Rachel Fisher, who will give us a perspective and a context on this through the lens of lived experience. The second is Debbie Garner, who has come to us today with a 30+ year history in law enforcement, in working with protecting children and prosecuting and uncovering those who would intend to do harm or have done harm to children. And the third speaker is Ryan Dunlap. Ryan will speak to us this morning about a thing called digital citizenship and how to manage ourselves and protect the children that we work with online in this crazy, chaotic, and ever-changing digital world and digital landscape. Those perspectives will bring to us, I think, a comprehensive way to begin to start to take steps. And don't wait on comfort to take steps. Be willing to take, again, the appropriate steps with the people and lives that you're a part of, in whatever role and capacity it is that makes sense. Don't wait. Waiting causes unnecessary harm. I heard somebody say several years ago, sometimes discomfort and sometimes the pain that we wrestle with as we go through this is ignorance leaving the body. They weren't saying that as a negative. They were saying it as a way to say sometimes as we gain more knowledge, our discomfort around that topic can go through a season where it increases, not decreases. And so if you find yourself in that situation this morning, reach back out, ask some questions, talk to organizations in your community that care, reach back out to us at Street Grace, and we'll help connect you with organizations in your community that are doing the work. But be willing to start. Be willing to start here. Let this be the day, let this be the time that for those of us that are involved in this or part of this conversation this morning or watching it online or watching the recording later, let this be the moment that we lean in. Let this be the moment that we take the first step and we join together, because none of us can do this individually. We often say that if it's one of us and we're all standing individually, we're like a pothole in the road and the bad guys just swerve around it and they keep on going. But if we lock arms and if we all understand the value and the importance of the small role that we may play, then collectively we're powerful. And collectively we can have an impact, and collectively we can make a difference in children's lives. That's a pretty high calling. It's a pretty worthy calling. And again, I want to say thank you to the OCJP. Thank you to the governor's office. Thank you to all of you who are a part of the conversation and have taken time to be here this morning. But without further ado, let's get started. As I mentioned, Rachel Fisher, who is our first speaker this morning, is a native of Detroit, Michigan. She's a survivor leader, chairs a survivor advisory council, and is a pioneer in the fight against human trafficking. She's got a BS in nursing that specializes in human trafficking research and finding missing children. Rachel is an ER nurse, a SANE nurse with a focus on adult and pediatric forensic nursing. She began speaking and sharing her story more publicly in training in 2013 when she published her autobiography, Taking Back the Pen. She shares her story with audiences and with people around the country where she feels like it will bring hope and encouragement and clarity around this issue. Rachel has served in several countries doing research, undercover mission work, collecting intelligence from traffickers and those victimized by sex trafficking and child sex trafficking. She's undertaken several rescue operations and assisted with the recovery of many missing children. She has testified and does testify in state and federal court as an expert witness. As a lived experience expert, Rachel consults with governmental and non-governmental agencies to formulate the best plan of action to fight sex trafficking and child sex trafficking on both the demand and the supply side. She trains officers on insiders investigation tips and trains healthcare professionals on identifying the identification of trafficking victims using verbal and non-verbal cues. She also addresses what's next after identification. She trains parents and students on social media trends and how to keep kids safe online. She explains multidisciplinary approaches, meeting victims to bring family justice and hold offenders accountable. Rachel consults with several agencies formulating action plans in the fight against the demand and the abuse of our children and of child sex trafficking. Rachel, it's an honor to have you with us this morning. Grateful and looking forward to some comments from you. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Bob. And thank you to everyone who's just here today. Everyone present, you all have such a unique role to play in this, in safeguarding our children. You're in positions of power, in positions of authority. You touch thousands of children's lives, and your impact is huge, and the potential for you to prevent what's happening in today's society is significant. When I was a child, if I had people like you who took the time to come onto a call like this to find out what's going on and how can we help, I may have been able to escape what happened to me. But I was a child in the foster care system. I was a vulnerable youth. I had access to the internet. I had a private Christian school, a great church to go to, and everything should have been fine, right? No, it wasn't. I had vulnerabilities. I had things that were targeted when I went online, when I was emailing in chat rooms, when I went to different websites and social media. I started being befriended. I started seeking people to give me what I needed and what I was lacking, and people who offered me opportunities. And I, unfortunately, at 15 was trafficked, and I went through a lot of years of pain. And when people found stuff online of who I'd been talking to, pictures that were posted of me, they looked at me as a bad child, as a delinquent. But I was simply a child who was given a very powerful tool, the internet. And I didn't know what to do, what to look for. It was my access to the world outside of the walls that I was caged in. And every child, every teenager, they seek that emotional support, the peer support, and they look for something. And if you don't know how to prevent that, if you don't know how to teach your children safety and be more on the offense than the defense, then it's a very scary place that your children are in. When you give your child access to the online world, you're giving the world access to your child. And you have to be prepared for that. And being on the defense, no child likes to be told what to do. No teenager wants to be told what to do. So when you find what they're doing online and you punish them, you take away their tablet, their phone, and you say you shouldn't be doing that, it's bad, then they're just getting punished and they don't like that. But when you come on the offense and you say, hey, here's this tablet, here's the digital era, but you may see this, you may be exposed to this. If somebody says this, then this. When you teach them before you're giving it to them, you're educating them. Then they're not being told what to not do. They're not in trouble. That way, when they access it and they say, oh yeah, they told me to look out for this and now I know to prevent it. And it's a totally different ballgame than coming at the back end. So prevention is key, awareness is key, being able to have those hard discussions. And it's tough because in schools, churches, nobody really wants to talk about sexual things. They don't want to talk about dirty things. And so we shelter our children, we shelter our ears because we don't want to believe it. But unfortunately, it's happening. Whether we like it or not, it's happening. It's happening to children. I'm a nurse now. I do forensics. And so I take care of children who have been abused and trafficked and assaulted. And it's a common theme. I've seen as young as 8 years old that were trafficked and groomed online. The average age is about 12 to 14 years old, but in thousands of patients, it's a common theme that they met this person online, that it was through a chat room, through a gaming console, through social media. It's happening and we can't prevent it, but we can be educated and aware of it to be able to make a difference in our children's lives. I wish that I had this community in my life because everyone here, you are a village and it takes a village to be able to come around and help children. So in whatever capacity that you're able to, be aware, be educated, and spread that knowledge with whoever you can because you impact children. And those children look to you for guidance, for support, and you have the opportunity to be able to make that difference and prevent people from going through the traumas that are happening. And so I'm just so grateful that I'm just able to talk to you all today and that you're listening because that's the first step. If you don't know that there's a problem, you don't know how to fix it. If you don't know how to fix it, you don't know what to do. So the fact that you're here is the first step. And I'm so excited because the impact that you can have just by being engaged and getting involved and educated is huge. And for the kids, for the children, for our youth, this is crucial. You are crucial. You are the stakeholders. You are the people that can make it happen. So thank you just for being here, and I'm excited to see what happens moving forward just with the outcome of all of us coming together here and fighting for our kids.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you for sharing your heart. Thank you for sharing your passion. Thank you for the encouragement. Thank you for all that you do and for being a part of this. We are better as a movement, and we are better because of survivors and those with lived experience who will come back and speak to this issue and lead us in the process of making all the advances that we're doing. Up next is Debbie Garner. Debbie is the solutions evangelist for an organization called Grayshift. They are a leading provider of mobile digital device forensics, specializing in law enforcement access and extraction. With an impressive track record of leading digital forensic investigations to identify child predators, Debbie has a minimum of 30 years experience with the Georgia Bureau of Investigations. She's led the Child Exploitation and Computer Crimes Unit, CIAC, and the Georgia Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force, the ICAC Task Force. In her current role with Grayshift, Debbie is a thought leader and industry evangelist, and she uses her extensive knowledge to align the voice of law enforcement with Grayshift's forward-looking strategy that will drive awareness among law enforcement and government agencies, technology partners, and channel partners globally. As mentioned, prior to joining Grayshift, Debbie was the special agent in charge of the GBI's CIAC unit, where she led a 35-person team of special agents, digital forensic investigators, criminal intelligence analysts, and administrative personnel. As the commander of the ICAC task force, her team successfully identified over 2,500 child predators. She also graduated from the FBI National Academy, Session 267, and was a member of the FBI's Domestic Security Alliance Council. A post-certified instructor since 1997, Debbie is presented frequently on Medicaid fraud, firearms, intelligent operations, and internet safety, as well as online child safety and exploitation. She's passionate about gathering actionable digital evidence to solve crimes and to protect our community. She's very excited and most passionate about digital forensics for law enforcement and continues to foster innovation in the field. And Grayshift clearly has its finger on the heartbeat of that evolving industry. We're thrilled and honored to have Debbie with us. Debbie's been a longtime partner of Street Grace and a friend to hundreds of organizations and thousands of children and those whose lives that she's affected over her career. So Debbie, really honored to have you. Thanks for taking time to be with us. I know this is an incredibly busy season for you, and we're just thrilled that you could stop by and take a few minutes to share and to talk to our folks.
Hello, my name is Debbie Garner, and I recently retired from a 30-year career with the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. While I had a lot of varied assignments during that time, the last 8 years of my career was as the special agent in charge of GBI's Child Exploitation and Computer Crimes Unit. I was also the commander of the Georgia Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force, or also known as the ICAC Task Force. That task force consisted of approximately 280 local, state, and federal law enforcement agencies in Georgia, all working together to combat instances of online child sexual exploitation. There are 61 ICAC task forces across the country, all working together to fight the online sexual exploitation of children. Now, our mission was to detect, investigate, and assist with the prosecution of crimes such as the possession, distribution, and production of child pornography or child sexual abuse material, the online enticement of children, and the child sex trafficking arena. We had plenty of work to do. Today, I'm going to talk with you about some of the online risks for children and teens. So as I thought about the best way to truly relay to you facts about the risks for children and teens online, I decided to refer to statistics, research, and the collective experience of my office, the law enforcement agencies across the country, and really around the world. I've been asked to describe the online and digital threat landscape from the perspective of someone who worked for years to reduce the online sexual exploitation of children and worked for years to find and stop those preying on our children. Now, there is almost no way to cover all of the details in a short amount of time, but I'm willing to I'm going to try to give you a high-level overview of what is happening online that can and does harm our children. There are four main sources for the facts and statistics that I'm going to include: the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, or NCMEC, Thorn, the Child Rescue Coalition, and the Internet Watch Foundation. And while there are many online dangers, such as online predators, sexting, sextortion, cyberbullying, and fraudulent activity, many of which are interrelated, today we are going to concentrate on online predators and online enticement, as well as sexting and sextortion. Now, an online child predator is someone that seeks contact with children and adolescents on the internet for abusive and exploitative purposes that are typically sexual. They use the internet as a method to facilitate contact with children and to potentially harm them online or offline. Online child predators target their victims using a multitude of resources or applications, which may include forums, social media, chat rooms, instant messaging, and other internet-based platforms that have a younger user base. On many online platforms, they can engage with victims anonymously, try to befriend them, conceal their identity, or pretend to be someone that they are not to decrease their chance of detection. An online predator will often be a master manipulator. They will use the internet to be whomever they want. They'll look for kids who are emotionally vulnerable and may have issues at home or at school. Empathize with your child to gain their trust. and they target both boys and girls. I would like to add that there is no demographic for online predators. During online proactive undercover operations conducted by ICAC task forces across the country, the ages of the offenders arrested varied significantly. They came from different socioeconomic backgrounds, and they were diverse races and ethnicities. And while predominantly male, there were female offenders as well. Online grooming is a term used broadly to describe the tactics abusers deploy through the internet to sexually exploit children. It can happen quickly or over a period of time. However, at its core, it's a process of exploiting trust to shift expectations of what safe behavior is, and is leveraging fear and shame to keep a child silent. For child predators, once they can initiate contact and gain access to the child, the grooming process begins. And the predator starts to deliberately befriend and establish an emotional connection with a child to lower the child's inhibitions in preparation to abuse the child online or offline. They groom children by having conversations that ultimately develop trust and secrecy. They do this as a result of manipulating a child by listening to and sympathizing with the child's problems and insecurities. They often affirm the feelings and the choices made by the child. They will turn a child against their family and friends. An online predator may make your child feel guilty or ashamed for speaking with them. They will prey on a teen's desire for romance, attention, adventure, and sexual information. Often they will exploit the child's natural sexual curiosities. It's not uncommon for a predator to send your child gifts through the mail, like cell phones, webcams, clothing, and bus tickets. And often they will send a child revealing pictures of themselves when asking the child for similar pictures. They're trying to normalize this behavior. During and after the grooming process, an online predator may engage in sexual conversations, ask your child for revealing pictures, ask to meet your child in person, ask to meet for sexual purposes. They may blackmail or extort your child for additional sexual images, content, or money, and they may even ask them to have sex with other people for money, resulting in a trafficking situation. Some of those predatory activities can and often lead to what we call sextortion. Sextortion takes on different forms, but at its core, it is a threat to expose sexual images in order to make a person do something. These threats can come from both strangers met online or once intimate or romantic partners, boyfriends and girlfriends, attempting to harass, embarrass, and control victims. Sextortion frequently happens to children and occurs on social media networking sites, as well as texting and messaging platforms. Some of the most common tactics include threatening to post the child's images or videos online, sharing the child's images with family and friends, using multiple identities to contact and manipulate the child, threatening physical harm against the child or their family, and even creating fake profiles of the victim using their images. Now, the FBI has recently reported that in the so-called sextortion schemes that have recently become more prevalent, adult predators pretending to be young girls contact young males, usually between the ages of 14 and 17, online over any platform used to meet and communicate, such as gaming, applications, or social media accounts. They then use deception and manipulation to convince the young males to engage in explicit activity over video, which is then secretly recorded by the predator. The predator then reveals that they have made the recording and threatens those videos will be posted online if the victim doesn't pay. Boys are no safer than girls online. According to a 2017 research study conducted by Thorn that included almost 2,100 survivors, 1 in 4 victims were 13 or younger when they were first threatened. 2 in 3 victims were girls threatened before the age of 16. 60% of online victims were threatened within 2 weeks of initial contact. 47% of victims experienced threats daily. 65% of victims blocked offenders from contacting them. 45% of victims reported that the contact did not stop after they tried blocking the offenders. 62% of victims complied with demands in an effort to make the threat stop. 1 in 3 victims never told anyone. If you would like more information on these statistics, you can use the link on the pictured slide. Online predators know where children frequent online. They go to those platforms in order to seek out victims. They are on every social media platform, every gaming platform, live streaming applications, and on the dark web. So how do we know these things? Let's talk about how these cases come to light most often. Federal law states that internet service providers, or ISPs, and electronic service providers, or ESPs, are required by federal law to report instances of child sexual exploitation that they find on their platform to NCMEC. And when we talk about ISPs and ESPs, those are companies such as Meta, who own applications such as Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp. We're referring to all the applications on your phone, such as TikTok, Twitter, Pinterest, and companies such as Google, Comcast, Microsoft, and Verizon. Now, there are currently approximately 1,600 companies that report to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Now, they are not required to look for this content, but they are required to report it if found. However, many do look for it, and because they don't want this content on their platform either. And they're good at looking for it. However, it is a massive problem. We're going to talk about how voluminous this issue is momentarily. While NCMEC receives most of the reports from internet service providers and electronic service providers through a designated electronic system, the public can make reports to NCMEC also. In order to make a report related to suspected online sexual exploitation of children, you can go to the NCMEC website at www.missingkids.org or call 1-800-THE-LOST. NCMEC also has a very large library of education material related to internet safety that covers all topics for all audiences and all ages. Please visit their website for access to that education material. On this slide, you can see the types of things that are reported to NCMEC through the cyber tip line. They include crimes such as the possession, distribution, and production of child sexual abuse material, commonly referred to legally as child pornography. It's the online enticement of children, child sex trafficking, and other related criminal activity. Now, if we dive into the volume of reports made to NCMEC for the past 3 years, you can see a marked increase. In 2019, there were 16.9 million reports related to the online sexual exploitation of children. That increased to 21.7 million reports in 2020 and 29.4 million in 2021. And you can see on this chart that the breakdown of the types of reports received. Consistently, the type of report received most is related to the possession, distribution, and manufacture of CSAM material, or child sexual abuse material. The next most reported crime type is the online enticement of children, and then child sex trafficking. Now, the images that are being reported to NCMEC, known as CSAM, are as horrible as you can imagine. Many are of very young children, and they can be very violent. Many of these images were taken by persons known to the child, a family member or a neighbor, a coach, teacher, or member of the clergy. However, many of the images that were produced, they were produced exactly the way that we've been talking about today, by predators that have manipulated a child into either meeting them or self-producing imagery. Additionally, traffickers will produce images of children that they are trafficking for the purpose of advertising them online. Images and videos of sexual abuse are readily available through virtually every internet technology today, including social networking websites, file sharing sites, photo sharing sites, gaming devices, and mobile applications. With the amplification of the internet and digital technologies, the circulation of child sexual abuse material has exploded worldwide. People are sharing these images that they are creating of these children. Now, since the inception of the Child Rescue Coalition, they have identified 72.5 million unique IP addresses worldwide sharing and downloading sexually explicit images and videos of children. The most shared child abuse file has been seen linked with over 2.5 million unique IP addresses. So I hope I've imparted some knowledge to you regarding the dangers for children online. It is a real danger, and moving forward, the internet is not going away. Children are online at very early ages, and as trusted adults in their lives, we must teach them how to be safe online. I know other presenters will be speaking on how to talk to your children about these topics. It is often an awkward, but a very necessary conversation. And here's a link to some information that truly resonates with me as a good system to start the conversation with your children. And again, don't forget about the education material that you can find on the NCMEC website, as well as on the website for Thorn. So thank you for allowing me to speak with you today. If you ever need anything, please reach out to me. If you have any questions, feel free to email or call. And thank you again, and be safe.
Debbie, great job. I'm Candace with Street Grace, and we had a question come in for you, Debbie. That question is, what are some ways traffickers prey on our children?
In my experience, traffickers seek out vulnerable people such as youth who are living in poverty or on the streets or experience physical or sexual abuse or addiction. They pose as a friend, offering meals, gifts, or someone to talk to. In some cases, traffickers may use another young person to befriend and recruit their victims. This recruitment can happen in public places as well as online through social media sites or through false advertisements or promises about job opportunities that might appeal to young people, such as modeling or acting. Although runaway and homeless youth are particularly vulnerable, law enforcement has come across victims who were groomed and recruited while living at home and attending school. There are also times parents and family members sell children for sex in exchange for money, drugs, or something of value. In these situations, the trafficker already is someone with proximity to the victim and knows enough about the victim to even isolate and manipulate them. Trafficking cases are hard to work for many reasons, but one reason is that many trafficking victims do not identify as victims and are attached to their trafficker.
We had another question for you, Debbie. Someone wrote, if there are images of me when I was younger or of my child online, what can I do about it?
We used to tell people once an image is online, it was there forever. So while it can be difficult to remove all copies of images online, there are ways you can start removing images of yourself or your child. If you need help removing your nude or sexually exploitated images or videos taken when you were a child from the internet, or your child's images from the internet, you can notify the company where your images are posted yourself. And you can make a report to the cyber tip line for help requesting removal of your sexually exploitated images and videos. And there are instructions on how to do this on the website, on NCMEC's website, missingkids.org. So victims and families often need additional support finding resources and figuring out the next steps through this process. And there's information on this process on the NCMEC website.
That's fantastic, Debbie. Thank you so much. I hate that we only had 15 minutes. I think we could sit and listen to you and your experience, your stories, and the practical ways that we can do things that matter and to learn more about this space. So really grateful for you taking some time to be with us. Up next is Ryan Dunlap. Ryan is the Executive Director for Street Grace Tennessee. And combines more than 14 years of specialized law enforcement ministry and law enforcement experience with 6 years of leadership in ministry. Throughout his law enforcement career, Ryan served in a variety of capacities, including the Special Victims Units, where he specialized in investigating sex crimes against children and was assigned to the Child Abduction Response Team, a team dedicated to locating missing, endangered, and abducted children and those at risk for being trafficked. In addition to his work with the Special Victims Unit, Ryan served in several collateral positions to include SWAT hostage negotiations and the Crisis Intervention Team. In 2015, Ryan transitioned out of law enforcement to join the leadership team at a large multi-site mega church in Atlanta, Georgia, as the Director of Life Safety. He was responsible for overseeing enterprise-wide security operations for the church. He worked closely with ministry leaders to create several policies aimed at protecting children within the congregation who were suspected victims of sexual abuse, physical abuse, and/or neglect. He was later advanced to the Executive Director of Operations role and was tasked with leading the day-to-day functions of the operations team, overseeing the enterprise-wide strategy for information technology, life safety, facilities management, and operations personnel. Ryan is a member of the state's sexual assault response team, state expert committee, and additionally serves as a law enforcement chaplain and critical incident stress management facilitator. Ryan earned his MS in communication and leadership, and a graduate certificate in strategic communication from Purdue University. He earned his BA in criminal justice from St. Leo and continues to this day to educate and advance his career with additional certifications and trainings. He's completed more than 3,600 hours of law enforcement training. Ryan, thanks again for being with us today. Thanks for what you do in the state of Tennessee, for what you do with Street Grace. It's an honor to have you and look forward to hearing what you have to say, again, in practical ways about how we can protect and guard the children who we have been given responsibility for. Thanks so much for your time, Ryan.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ryan Dunlap, and I do serve as the Executive Director of Street Grace Tennessee. And I'm really excited to talk to you about this session that we're going to be calling Digital Citizenship. Now, I'm coming at you from two different angles. One, as a former investigator, someone who's spent a lot of time investigating crimes against children on the internet, but also as a father. And I think that probably qualifies me more to have this conversation with you than some of the other things that I've had an opportunity to do throughout my law enforcement career and now on the advocacy side on behalf of Street Grace. So we're going to be talking about some things that you can take away as a parent or advocate or someone in the space of caring for kids on what you can do to help keep them safe in this digital age. Because a lot of things have changed. We're seeing a lot of shifts in the world that we're navigating in technology. And so let's have a conversation about digital citizenship. And what is it, and why do we even need to know about it, really? So here's what I would ask you to do to consider this. If we think about citizenship, just as citizens of Earth, right? We know that citizenship is the level of connectedness and membership that an individual has to a particular community. And communities can be defined by several different cultural components. And so we know that these can be language and beliefs. It's the clothes we wear, the food that we eat, it's the government and the money that we spend. All of these things really define the communities that we live and operate in. Well, I would invite you to consider that the internet is an online world of its own, right? And it too is defined by connectedness and membership that an individual has to a particular community. And these online communities are also identified by particular cultural components, right? These cultural components exist in the same way that they do in our natural world. There are language components to being on the internet. There's governance on the internet and customs and currency. And so really what it comes down to is understanding that how we exist in the real world is not too different than how we exist on the internet, right? Now, some of us are native to wherever it is that we live, and others of us are transplants or immigrants. And so I want you to think about this conceptually, right? Anyone who was born at 1983 or sooner, they're typically what's referred to as a digital immigrant, which means they lived in an analog world and then they landed in a digital world. Whereas to our kids, the only world they know is digital. It's the only thing that they've ever seen. It's likely the only thing that they ever will see or iterations of it to come. And so they are digital natives. Now, think about this, for example, if you were to take a trip and take your kids back to the place where you were raised, right? And for me, for example, I was born in Germany. And so before I were to take my kids to Germany, I might go over some of the currency differences between being in the United States and being in Europe. I might even share some of the language and some of the customs and norms that I experienced growing up in Germany that my kids have never experienced. I would make sure that they were comfortable with this environment so they knew how to navigate it. They would learn the language so they could ask for directions, for example, or maybe order a meal. Well, in the same sense, and what's a little bit different here is our kids are the natives. And so what really happens is we are living in a world that is really dictated by them, but we don't take the time to learn the language, to learn the customs and the norms as adults and as parents. And so the kids are the ones who hold the keys as the natives. And as immigrants, we need to really learn how to go to them and say, hey, what is it like in this space? What's the language you guys are using? What are the customs and what are the norms? Because it really defines how we understand this world. In the world that they're really living in. Let's move this over here real quick. And so what are the things that we need to know about the online culture of the internet? Well, we know that the internet has its own customs. There are informal rules and etiquette about online engagement. How long does it take to send a text message before it's too long, right? What does it mean to be kept on read, as the kids say sometimes when you get DMs? What's the appropriate behavior in a chat group? Or in an online live stream? There are just different customs and norms that we may not be clear on that other people are. There's language. We know that language has evolved a lot in the online space. AlgoSpeak really is one of these new things that we're paying attention to because remember COVID, when we got neck deep in the pandemic, one of the things that happened was we know that there were a lot of things that Facebook was doing specifically to limit how people were communicating about the pandemic. And so if you were to post something that says, I've got COVID, or I don't believe this, or I do believe this about COVID, or something related to those lines, Facebook would censure that. You might get something slapped on there that says, hey, this is fake news, or this is not verified information, or something along those lines, or it might be completely taken down. Okay. Well, people started figuring out how to avoid their posts being found. And it's what we're calling AlgoSpeak, algorithmic language that was designed to defeat algorithms. Well, why is that important for online enticement? Well, because there's a lot of language that is censored on platforms that's driven towards sexual content and exploitation. And so we're seeing language evolve in this space much the same way. So instead of someone writing about sex, they might write segs, S-E-G-G-S. Or instead of writing out nipples, for example, they might write nipnops. And there are a lot of different ways that this kind of comes out. But what we really have to understand here is that this language, if you don't know what the language is, you may see innocent language on your child's phone and not know how to discern it, right? Because not all of it is obvious. For example, when we were talking about the pandemic, one of the things people kept saying was paninis. You know, how are you navigating the paninis? And it seemed a little weird, but paninis was a word people were using to talk about the pandemic without it getting flagged. And so it's important for us to understand that language has evolved, and now there are hashtags and tweets and different things that dictate how we communicate with each other online. Currency, we know, Bitcoin, gaming, Ethereum. There's a lot of different digital currency out there in the world. And one thing that we know about exploitation, child exploitation, is that whenever someone exchanges something of value for a child's body, it is human trafficking, human sex trafficking. And what we're finding now is that what's being exchanged for children has flipped. And now we're seeing digital currency. Think about video games that the kids play online, like Roblox, for example. They've got their own digital in-game currency. And we're seeing cases where kids have been promised game currency in exchange for doing sexual acts. Geography really refers to the places where people can exist on the internet: social media, blogs, networking sites, the dark web, things like that. Governance, we know that there are end-user agreements, laws, company policies, and constitutional protections on the internet. All of these things dictate what we're allowed to say, what we're not allowed to say, what is flagged, what's not flagged. Depending on the platform you're on, different things are going to be allowed. There are things that you can do on Facebook that you can't necessarily do on Twitter. And there are things that you can do on Snapchat that you might not be able to do on TikTok. And so understanding how each policy is regulated is going to be really important for us protecting our kid, or each platform is regulated. It's going to be really important for us knowing how to protect our kids. And then we know that there's art and symbols that really dictate the online environment, memes and NFTs and emojis and things of that nature. We communicate with pictures and with video. So All of that really comes together to help us understand this definition of digital citizenship. Digital citizenship is the informed, responsible, safe, and effective use of the internet and technology to engage with society. And so what do you do when you've recognized that your kids live in this world that you may not be a part of? And I think this is really important to really kind of point out here. A lot of us as adults have made decisions. We've made intentional decisions not to engage on the internet. We've delayed either our time on jumping onto some of these platforms. We say, I don't believe in Facebook or Instagram or TikTok. I'm not going to have a profile. Can I share something with you? Hey, even if you've decided not to be a digital resident, you're still a digital citizen. Aspects of your life still exist on the internet. You've got banking that happens online. Now medical records are kept online. I can go on any city or county GIS website right now, and if you are a homeowner and your name is attached to that, we can find it for free. It's public information. And so simply because we've decided not to curate our identity on the internet doesn't mean that our identity is not present on the internet. So it's really important that we understand we still have responsibilities to manage what our information is on the internet, how our kids are operating on the internet. And it's not enough to simply say, well, I don't believe in it, I don't want to be in there or be on there. We still have to participate in making sure that we're activating safe habits in ourselves and for our kids. So something that I want to suggest that we use to really remember how to engage in this well is something we call ECHO. Okay, ECHO. And it's easy to remember, but what we're talking about here is acting early, communicating clearly, connecting honestly, and engaging often. These 4 things that we can do as parents, as advocates, as police officers, as nurses and doctors, whenever we're serving the interests of kids, teachers, right? Whenever we're serving the interests of kids and we're having conversations about online behavior and digital citizenship, I want you to think about ECHO. We're going to take a little bit of time to go through each of these steps because I think it's important for you to really understand how this can help you have strong, encouraging conversations to keep kids safe in this digital age. So we're going to start here with acting early. We don't want to delay. We want to take steps to mitigate information. Here's the thing. We live in a world that is desperate to give our kids a definition of what is and what is not appropriate online, especially when it comes to sexual conduct and behavior. And so we've got to get in front of the conversation. We want to make sure we control the conversation, that we're not responding on the back end, because it's much harder to change someone's perspective on something once it's already been established. For children who don't know anything about online exploitation or unhealthy habits of sex, if they learn about it in unhealthy ways, that's really hard to undo. And so when we can get in front of that and we can frame those conversations effectively as parents, as trusted individuals in a child's life, then we give them power to navigate these conversations that might turn into confrontations among their peer groups or online and digital spaces. So we don't want to be late to the conversation. So some things that we can do by acting early or to act early is we can conduct a technology audit. I did this once I changed our home's network over from our traditional router to something that's called a wireless mesh network. And it was a little bit bigger. It helped us navigate all of the devices on our internet here at home a little bit more effectively. But what I realized was we had well over 20 different devices connected to the internet between myself, my wife, and our 3 kids. 20 different devices. When you think about cell phones and tablets and laptops and TVs and all of the different things that are connected to our Wi-Fi, it was almost a little overwhelming, to be honest with you. And so our wireless mesh network allows me to see all of the devices on the network, to see how much bandwidth they're consuming. I can even assign permissions to each individual device. I can turn them off. I can turn them on. I can regulate how these devices are used. It gave me a lot of control to not just dictate how the devices were used, but it gave me information to see how they're being used. Right? Are we using this device for videos and this one for text communication? Are we using this one to create and to draw and to make music or art? It just allowed me to see what my kids' habits were with technology. So we did a technology audit. And then we educated ourselves, my wife and I, on how technology works. in our home, right? And so we really have to understand the technology now. And I say now because it changes all the time. And so you want to get current. You want to make sure that the information you have about technology is going to be relevant 6 to 12 months from now, or what you might have known about what your kids were doing before might have changed. A lot of platforms are always doing updates. And as you're updating, it gives you new features and new access and new capabilities. And so you want to make sure that you stay current. Start at home with understanding what you're currently using at your house. And then you can kind of go broader from that and see what else is out there so that you understand what the world is. More important, though, I think is this: model the behavior that you wish to see. Be a good digital citizen, even if you aren't an active digital resident. I think this is important. And I'll leave this here, right? This isn't for your behavior, but I think it's important to hear it. If you're doing things online that aren't healthy, there's a strong chance that your kids are going to see it or they'll be impacted by it. It's very difficult to have a digital footprint that is isolated nowadays. And so you've probably seen this. If you're searching for something on the internet one day, you start getting ads for it tomorrow. So if we as adults are doing things online that we probably shouldn't be doing, there's going to be evidence of that, residue of that could potentially make its way in front of our kids. And we don't want that to accidentally happen. So we want to make sure that we are practicing what we're preaching and we're using the internet in safe ways as well. So here are some things that you should know. I'm not going to read through all of them, but you can kind of see as you're doing your technology audit and you're talking to your kids about this, you can really kind of understand some things better here. How many internet devices do we own? How might my kids communicate online? What apps are installed on their devices? What are my kids' online usernames? And the list goes on and on. These are some specific questions that can help prompt you to get through acting early a little bit more effectively. Communicate early. This is about setting boundaries and guidelines online. And we also want to talk about personal safety. So I don't want you to limit this to just technology. Also, we can talk about our bodies. We can talk about relationships. It's going to be really important that we are communicating early about a lot of these different things so we can establish boundaries between real world relationships and those that exist online. My son, for example, he has some friends that he plays sports with. And sometimes they come home from playing sports and they want to get online together. And so what is acceptable and what is not acceptable? How do I know that the people that are connected with, my kids are connected with online, are the same people they're connected with in the real world? Because my kids are really quick to say, oh, that's my friend. That's my friend. And I've learned that some of these friends are people that they've never actually met in real life. So how do we navigate those boundaries? I also want to recommend that you invite kids into the process of creating these rules and boundaries, that you're not just throwing rules at them, but you give them an opportunity to speak into it. And I think this is really, really helpful that you have enabling conversations and not limiting conversations. And this is what that means. A lot of times as parents we say, you can't do this, you can't see these things, you can't go to this website, it can't be like this. The way I suggest that parents do this is that you have enabling conversations. Here's what you can do. Here's what you're able to do now. And if anything other than that presents itself, or if there's another window that opens up that you want to try to do something new, come and let me know. And so this is what happened with my son. My son knew that there were certain games that were vetted. I checked them out. I did the audit. I played them. I figured them out. I learned what the parental controls were. I disabled the things in the game that I didn't like. And as time went on and we had trust that was generated from that, he called and asked and said, hey, well, I want to do these other things on the game. Can I get a microphone and talk to my friends? And so we had to come up with new boundaries for that, right? I want to know when the friends are logged in. They can only be in a private group. I get to set it up. I dictate how that technology is used and how long. I get on the phone with dad or mom for the friend, and we make sure that our kids are both connected. And it sounds like a lot of steps, but it's important because, there are conversations that happen in our kids' world that if we're not paying attention to them, they can be really harmful, and they can be exploitative, or they can be harmful to their minds about the things that they hear. Okay. And we want to make sure we're following up regularly, discussing the risks of online conduct. Another thing that's really important is make sure we talk to our kids about what they should and should not share. We don't share passwords. We don't share names and addresses and phone numbers. This is really important to talk about a boundary because, and we'll get into this a little bit later, but you want to make sure that whatever platform your kids are on is the platform they stay on. So what I mean by that is if you have a friend that your kids, or if your kids have a friend that they've connected with online, one of the ways that exploiters isolate kids from safe places is they will say, well, what's your phone number, or what's your Snapchat, or what's your Instagram handle? I'm going to connect with you there. Well, if the game my son is playing has established parental controls, but then he engages in an offline conversation or in a conversation in another platform, well, then those protections go out the window. And so one of the boundaries that we have is making sure that you only communicate with your friends on the platform that you're on. If you want to change platforms, we got to have a conversation first. So Connect Honestly really is about allowing your personal comfort to not dictate when conversations start, right? Because here's a reality. A lot of times as parents, we will delay an important conversation with our kids simply because we're uncomfortable about it. And a lot of times they're not really all that uncomfortable about it. You know, as an investigator, one of the worst things that I would hear from parents is that they would have the conversation with their kids, and their kid would come back and be like, oh, I've already heard about that. I've already had that talk. Tommy told me about it. Or we talked about it in school. And it's really frustrating because now you're behind the curve and you have to kind of change the conversation or make sure that whatever was shared wasn't something that goes against what you would actually share or that you believe. So you want to make sure that you don't allow your discomfort or embarrassment to dictate when you have the conversation. You want to be proactive and be prepared to give healthy context to unhealthy content that they might have already been exposed to. The whole goal here is to foster trust, safety, and if necessary, forgiveness. Because when you open this door, your child may come up and say, hey, I've already had this conversation. We've already talked about this before. And so unfortunately, I need to admit some things to you. They're going to be looking for some forgiveness. They're going to be looking for someone to say, hey, it's okay. We're safe. Let's get better. Okay. So here are some things to consider that you might need to talk about. Might need to talk about sex and intimacy, healthy relationships, pornography, puberty, gender preference, sexual preference. These are all things that are happening in the world around us. And so as parents, I just encourage you to make sure that you're giving some context to your kids according to what your family's beliefs are. Okay, and engage often. This is really one of those things about saying, hey, we're not just going to have the conversation once. It's not a one and done. We're going to be super engaged continuously. Because here's the thing. If regular engagement is a part of your family dynamic, if you regularly sit down and have conversations and you're involved in each other's lives, it's going to be less awkward when you decide to just sit down and have a random conversation about their online behavior, right? And so we want to make sure that family engagement is a normal part of your family behavior. And it allows us to be vigilant and to really look for the signs of exploitation more effectively. Also, keep in mind that it may not look like sex. It might not be sexual content. It can be harmful content. Cyberbullying is a big part of where exploitation starts. And so if you're hearing conversations about harassment or things that are coming from your kids' online interactions as leading them to feel bad about themselves, that can also be an indicator. So we want to make sure that we're asking some good questions. Hey, what do you do and what do you enjoy doing online? Have you seen anything online that's made you feel uncomfortable? Has anyone shared pictures or videos with you that are inappropriate? If someone was harassing online, do you know what to do or who to talk to about it? And if everything you did online was suddenly public, how would that make you feel? And I think that really is a good question. So this echo concept really is the toolbox that I think helps parents to at least get things started. We want to make sure that we are doing things early, that we are doing things clearly, honestly, and often, because online exploitation is a process. It's not a one-time thing. This is going to happen throughout the life of your child and quite honestly, even further than that into adulthood. And so the idea here is to get them prepared to be able to navigate this well on their own so that they might not ever need to have a negative conversation about it, but the preparation that they had really allowed them to stay safe along the way. I really hope that this was helpful. I know that our time was short, but I really hope that it helped you to really get a strong understanding for the practical things that you can do to start a conversation to keep your kids safe.
Ryan, great job. Candace from Street Grace. And one of the questions that someone asked was, what are the indicators and risks I should look out for if my child is being targeted online?
Okay, so It's a good question, but I also want to give it some context because sometimes if you just get a long list of indicators, you might get some false positives. You might see one or two behaviors and then conclude like, "Oh my gosh, my kid's being targeted online." And that's not always accurate. And so I'll say this, as parents, we should know our kids' baseline. You should know what they are on a normal, regular day, not when they're up, not when they're down, when they're just normal. And then everything that you see or observe from there, kind of look from that. So, for example, if your kid is incredibly sociable and you start to notice that they're a little isolated, that could be grounds for a conversation. If they've got a friend that they've always been talking to or a group of friends that they've always been connected to, and those friend groups start to break off a little bit, might be grounds for a conversation. If your child's becoming a little bit more secretive than they used to, or if you're just noticing personality changes, big personality changes that are usually that can be tied to online activity. I know one of the things that I started noticing with one of my kids was that she acted a little bit differently every time the device turned off. It's like the device would turn off and she wasn't herself. And so it gave us an opportunity to have a conversation. And it was a healthy conversation. There was nothing happening that we weren't happy about, but it was an indicator because I knew her baseline. I noticed that every time she shut that off, she seemed disturbed or bothered. And what I learned was that she was shutting it off because she started seeing things that she knew she wasn't supposed to be seeing. She was frustrated that some of her friends were kind of navigating this thing the way that she didn't think that they should have according to the rules that we have in our home. And so she was separating herself, but she didn't feel good about it. And so it was a great conversation starter. I think if you know the baseline for your child, it will open the door for conversations like this because you'll be able to say, that's not right. And then you've got some good questions that you can ask to follow up with them on.
One more question for you, Ryan. Someone asked, what tools can I use to keep my kids safe at home while they're online?
So I've got a recommendation for a couple of apps that I've used, but let me give some context first and say that it's more than just the app, right? Parental involvement matters. And so this is not going to be one of those things that you can just throw an application at, set it and forget it. You still have to be involved, but the tools can help to supplement the relationship and the agreement that you set with your kids. So if we're talking about mobile devices, Bark and Custodio are both great apps. I've got a version of Custodio on my phone, and my kids have the kids version on their phone. And with that, it allows me to see what their search history is, who they're talking to, what they're watching on the internet. I get a daily report sent to my email inbox that tells me all of these things. And if there's anything active that they're doing, like right now, that they shouldn't have done that I flagged, say there's a website that I know I don't want them going to, it'll send that notification to my phone. A lot of layers to it, very, very helpful. Bark does some of the same things, but the biggest difference is that Custodio does have that free version if you don't have the ability to make that investment. The other thing that is important is if you want like a browser search tool, and there are several out there. One that I've used in the past is called Covenant Eyes, and so that limits the websites that your kids are able to go to. And so that's one to look into. And then lastly, if you're into streaming movies, our family loves to watch movies, but sometimes there's content in the movies that we don't want our kids to see. We use a browser extension called ClearPlay. And what ClearPlay does is it identifies these questionable moments in movies. Say, maybe there's alcohol or drugs being used, or there's sexual conversations or sexual content, whatever that might be. ClearPlay identifies that in the movie and gives you the ability to turn that scene on or off. And then when you watch the movie with your family, those particular scenes will be omitted. So super helpful. I really, really like it. It's helped us get through some movies that we thought were kind of cool for the kids, but had some moments that we didn't enjoy. So all that to say, though, they're tools, and none of this is going to be better than having a conversation and having strong agreement on what the guidelines and the rules are. And then we use a tool to supplement and enforce those things.
Thank you, Ryan. Wow, that's great. That's incredibly practical, incredibly helpful, and it's something that we can all begin to do today. Thank you, Rachel, for sharing your passion and your heart and giving that to us so that we can be better in the work that we do. Thank you, Debbie, for all that you have done and for the children that you have protected. Thank you for what you continue to do and for you illuminating for us the ways that you've seen this come to fruition, and so that we can be better equipped to fight this. And thanks again, Ryan. Again, I want to thank the Office of Criminal Justice Programs, OCJP, for the funding and the opportunity to present this. I want to thank Dave Warland and Governor Lee's office for their leadership in this. And I want to thank you. Thank you for taking the time. Your being here was a gift to us and to the children throughout the state, so that we can be prepared, so that we can lock arms, and so that we can do better together. One of the things that we say frequently is if we stand alone, we're like a pothole in the road. And when you see one of those, you just swerve around it. Sometimes you don't even slow down and you just keep going. But when we lock arms, together, we're stronger. Together, we're better. Together, we have an impact, and together we have a broader reach. And so we're grateful for that. And we're grateful for you allowing us to have the time to be able to share some of this and for us to come together. If there's anything we can do to help you or to assist you as you take these next steps, as you begin a series of awkward conversations, or if you look for ways to get plugged in a role in your community, in your neighborhood, whether it's a group of parents getting together, whether it's coaches that are meeting with a team, whether it's a business that wants to learn more about trafficking and child exploitation and how they can equip and better equip folks to identify and respond properly, let us know. We're here to help. We're here to serve. If we're not the right organization for you, that's okay. We will connect you with the one that is in your community if there's any way that we can help or serve you. We're grateful for your time, grateful for your interest, grateful for your passion, and grateful for your willingness to, at a minimum, just begin a series of awkward conversations. You don't have to be the expert. You don't have to have all of the data and all the latest research available to you. I want to encourage you with that. What I want to encourage you to do is to take the first step and let us know how we can help. We're thrilled to do it and thrilled to be a part. Thanks again for being with us, and we look forward to seeing you soon.